I never thought a simple house-sitting gig would turn my life upside down, but here we are. Let me back up a bit. I'm Alex, 28, pretty average guy with a love for books, bad coffee, and avoiding commitment like it's a contagious disease. So when I got the text from this online community board about house-sitting for a week in a swanky part of town, I figured, why not? Free stay, quiet place to write, and a chance to collect some extra cash. What could go wrong? The house was this beautiful, modern loft in downtown Seattle, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that looked expensive enough to make me nervous just sitting on the couch. The owner, Ethan, a graphic designer who travels a lot, was supposed to be away on a work trip for 10 days. He messaged me a few times before leaving. Super chill but clear. I was to treat his place like my own. No parties, no overnight guests, just feed the cat and water the plants. Easy enough. On day one, I settled in nicely. The cat, a grumpy tabby named Jasper, gave me the cold shoulder but eventually accepted a few tentative pets. I was already getting into my groove, ordering takeout, binge-watching some old comedies, and actually making progress on a story I'd been stuck on for months. The place was perfect for that kind of focus. Then came day 4. That's when I heard the key in the door around 9 p.m. I froze. The plan was solid. Ethan wouldn't be back until Saturday, and it was only Wednesday. My heart jumped, not because I was doing anything wrong, but just the weird panic of being caught somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. But before I could process, the door swung open, and there he was. Ethan himself, standing there like he'd just dropped in for a surprise visit. He looked maybe a bit tired from his trip, casually dressed in jeans and a simple black hoodie, hair tousled like he hadn't bothered styling it yet. His eyes scanned the room and landed on me. I'm pretty sure I turned 50 shades of red in that moment. "Hey," he said, with this easy smile that somehow made the whole situation feel less terrifying and more electric. Surprise? I managed a weak smile back, trying to play it cool even though my brain was doing backflips. "Yeah, surprise for me too. I thought you were gone for a while." He shrugged, kicking off his shoes and stepping inside. Plans changed. Figured I'd come home early. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be just some quiet, uneventful week. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. But something about Ethan, the way he looked at me, the way the room felt suddenly smaller and more charged, made me want to find out anyway. Ethan dropped his bag by the door and glanced around like he was rediscovering his own place. I tried not to stare too hard, but there was something about him. Maybe it was the way his eyes caught the light, or the easy confidence he carried, that made it hard to think straight. "Jasper still giving you attitude?" Ethan asked, nodding toward the cat who was now eyeing me warily from the armchair. "Yeah, he's a grump," I said, scratching the back of my neck, "but manageable." Ethan chuckled softly, and then, for a moment, there was this quiet space between us, like the world had slowed down just enough for me to notice things. The way the sunlight faded outside, casting those long shadows across the hardwood floor, the faint smell of his cologne mixing with the scent of the eucalyptus candle I'd lit earlier. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "how's the story coming along?" I blinked, surprised he remembered. "Actually, pretty well. Quiet here is good for writing." He smiled again, that easy, genuine smile that made my heart do that stupid skipping thing. "Glad to hear it." I felt my cheeks warm. "So, you're back early. Everything okay? Didn't mean to interrupt your trip or anything." Ethan shrugged, moving toward the kitchen. Things changed. Had to cut it short. Honestly, I wasn't in the mood for a fancy hotel or airport lounges anymore. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching me like he was waiting for something. I figured it was safe to be honest. "I get it," I said, trying to sound casual. "Sometimes you just want to come home." He nodded and then glanced down at his watch. "It's late. You must be tired." "Not really," I said, surprised at how much I wanted to stay in this moment, talking to him. I wasn't expecting company. "Yeah, me neither." He paused. "Mind if I crash here tonight?" "I'm beat." I swallowed hard. "Of course. You've got the place after all." He smiled, a little softer this time, and for a moment, I thought about how weird it was that a stranger's loft could suddenly feel like something more, like a shared space, even if we barely knew each other. The cat, Jasper, finally moved off the chair and padded over to Ethan, who crouched down and gave him a scratch behind the ears. That was when I realized Ethan's warmth wasn't just in his smile or eyes. It was in how he treated the little things, the overlooked parts of his life. We settled into the living room with separate mugs of terrible takeout coffee I'd ordered earlier. The conversation started slow: work, travel, favorite books. But it didn't take long before it felt less like small talk and more like two people who'd accidentally collided into something real. At one point, Ethan reached over and adjusted the throw pillow beside me. "So what's this story about?" he asked. I hesitated, then decided to share a little more than I normally would. It's about two guys who meet in a city just like this, both trying to figure out what they want out of life. One's a bit lost, the other's a bit scared, but they find something unexpected in each other. Ethan raised an eyebrow, a slow smile playing on his lips. "Sounds like a story worth telling." "Maybe," I said, feeling a little bolder. "Maybe it's even worth living." He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was searching for something in my eyes. My heart hammered, and suddenly the apartment felt too small, too quiet, too charged. "Hey," Ethan said softly, breaking the spell. "I'm glad I came back early." I bit my lip and nodded. "Me too." The rest of the night melted into easy conversation, shared laughter, and those stolen glances that made my stomach flip in ways I hadn't expected. When it was finally time to call it a night, Ethan stood near the doorway, hesitating. "Do you want to stay?" he asked. My mind screamed caution, but my heart whispered yes. "I'd like that," I said. He smiled, stepped closer, and for a moment the city outside faded entirely, leaving just the two of us. Two strangers turned something more in a loft that was supposed to be empty. And just like that, what started as a simple house-sitting job became the beginning of a story neither of us saw coming. Ethan didn't move away after I said that. Instead, he leaned in just a little, like he was checking if I was really serious, if I really meant it. The space between us felt electric, like the kind of quiet that presses down on you before everything changes. I could smell his cologne up close, a subtle mix of cedar and something fresh. Clean, but with a hint of warmth. My heart was thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. Then, just as quickly as the moment had come, he stepped back and gave me that easy smile again, the one that made my knees want to give out, but somehow also calmed the chaos inside my head. "All right then, you're officially my guest tonight," he said, gesturing toward the guest room down the hall. I nodded, my voice caught somewhere between nerves and excitement. "Sounds good." He handed me an extra blanket from the linen closet and said, "If you need anything, just shout, or text, or whatever." "Will do," I said, feeling ridiculously shy. That night, lying on the guest bed, I kept replaying the moments with Ethan over and over. There was something about him, not just his look or the way he carried himself, but the way he made space for me in his world without even trying. I wasn't sure if I'd ever felt that before, not like this. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee drifting through the open door. I got up and padded toward the kitchen, where Ethan was already bustling around, looking more relaxed than I'd expected. His hair was still messy, and he had this loose, comfortable way about him, like he was finally home. "Morning," he said, catching me in the doorway and handing me a mug. "Morning," I replied, taking the coffee gratefully. "You're an early riser." "Sometimes," he admitted, shrugging as he leaned against the counter. "Jet lag, I think." We stood there for a few seconds in comfortable silence, sipping coffee. Jasper, the cat, had warmed up a little, curling up on the windowsill and watching the city wake up. So, Ethan said, breaking the quiet, "How's the writing going?" I smiled, feeling the words come easier now. "Better, I think." "Feels different with you here." He raised an eyebrow. "Different? How?" "Less lonely," I said honestly. I wasn't expecting to feel this connected, even with someone I barely know. Ethan's expression softened. "That makes two of us." Over the next couple of days, things settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Ethan and I spent time in the loft, working on our own projects, but always finding reasons to share a moment or a laugh. We cooked dinner together one night. He was surprisingly good at improvising with whatever was in the fridge, and I was happy to be the sous chef, even if I mostly chopped things poorly. At some point, I realized I was starting to look forward to his presence. to his stories about design gigs and the little things he loved about the city, to the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his favorite coffee shop or the vinyl records he collected. One evening, we ended up sitting on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. Ethan had his arm draped casually over the back of my chair, and I felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with the blanket wrapped around my shoulders. "Can I ask you something?" he said suddenly, his voice low. "Sure. Why did you take this house-sitting job? I mean, besides the obvious. Free place, cash, quiet." I laughed softly. "Honestly, I needed a break. Life's been messy lately. Sometimes you just want to get away, you know?" Ethan nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. "Yeah, I get that." There was a pause, and then he looked back at me, sincere and open. "I'm glad you did." Before I could say anything, he leaned in again, closer this time, and I felt the world tilt ever so slightly. His hand found mine on the armrest, fingers brushing against mine, tentative but sure. My breath hitched, and the city around us seemed to hush, as if waiting. He smiled, a little shy, but full of something real. "I don't want this week to be just about watching my cat," I grinned, squeezing his hand. "Me neither." We stayed like that for a while, letting the night fold around us. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But even as I sank deeper into that feeling, a small part of me wondered how long this unexpected thing could last. Because Ethan's life was complicated. Travel, deadlines, an entire world I wasn't a part of. And I was just a guy who'd shown up to house sit a cat. Still, for now, none of that mattered. Not when I had him sitting beside me, hand in hand, under the endless city sky. The next morning came with the usual Seattle drizzle tapping softly against the windows, but inside the loft, things felt warmer than ever. I'd gotten used to Ethan being around, to the easy way he moved through the space like it was ours. It was weird how quickly my nervousness faded, and was replaced by this quiet comfort, like falling into a rhythm you didn't expect but desperately needed. I was sitting at the kitchen island, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard, trying to ignore the fact that I wasn't really writing. The story from a few days ago, about two guys meeting and finding something unexpected, kept swirling in my head, and maybe that was exactly what was happening with us. Ethan came in from the balcony, still wearing the hoodie he'd slept in, hair a messy halo around his face. He carried a steaming mug of coffee toward me. "Need a break?" he asked, eyebrows raised. I smiled, grateful for the distraction. "Yeah, maybe." "You?" He pulled up a stool beside me, settling in like he belonged there. "Always. I've got a design deadline next week that's stressing me out." I raised an eyebrow. "You're a graphic designer, right? I feel like I should have asked more about your work." Ethan chuckled. "It's not as glamorous as it sounds. Mostly it's deadlines, client emails, and caffeine." I laughed. "Sounds familiar." We talked for a while, about work frustrations, favorite TV shows, terrible first dates. The kind of conversation that makes you realize how much you've been missing out on by keeping your guard up. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "Work stuff," he said. "I should probably check this." I nodded, trying not to let the little disappointment show. I didn't want to be one of those people who made a big deal out of interruptions. But as he started scrolling, I felt a sudden surge of something. Maybe jealousy, maybe fear, that this moment, this connection, could be as fleeting as his trip was supposed to be. "Hey," I said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. "Don't let work ruin this." He looked up, surprised, then smiled. "You're right. I'm good." That was the moment I realized how much this mattered, to both of us. Later that day, we decided to take a break from the loft and head out to a nearby park. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air crisp and fresh. Ethan suggested we grab some sandwiches and picnic on the grassy hill overlooking the city. We sat close, sharing food and stories, the kind of easy intimacy that only comes from spending time together, really being present. At one point, Ethan reached over and brushed a stray leaf from my shoulder, his fingertips lingering a little longer than necessary. I caught his eye, and without thinking, leaned in. Our lips met softly at first, tentative, testing the waters. But then the kiss deepened, slow and sure, like we both needed to feel this was real. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and smiling, Ethan whispered, "I'm glad you're here, Alex." "Me too," I said, heart pounding. The days that followed were a blur of small moments that added up to something bigger. Cooking dinner together, watching old movies, long talks about hopes and fears. Jasper, the cat, even started warming up to me, curling up on my lap like I was part of the family now. But as the week edged toward its end, a quiet tension settled in. Ethan's work pulled him back. Calls, emails, deadlines, and I could feel the distance creeping in, even if we both tried to ignore it. One night, as we lounged on the couch, he turned to me with a serious look. "Alex, I need to tell you something," he said. My stomach twisted. "What's up?" "I wasn't just coming home early because of work," he admitted. "There's been some stuff going on, personal stuff. I guess I needed to be somewhere that felt safe." I reached out and took his hand. "You can tell me." He hesitated, then nodded. "I've been struggling with some family stuff, things I haven't really dealt with. Being away felt easier, but it wasn't helping. Coming home, having someone here, it's been good. More than good." I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight behind his words. "You're not alone." He looked at me, eyes shining with something like relief. "Thank you." We stayed like that for a long time, just holding on to each other in the quiet loft, the city humming softly outside. I realized then that what started as a simple house-sitting job had turned into something I never saw coming, a chance at something real, something messy and imperfect and worth fighting for. And suddenly, the idea of leaving at the end of the week felt a whole lot harder. The days following that conversation felt like a delicate dance between closeness and the ticking clock of reality. Ethan and I were still wrapped up in the bubble of the loft, but the end of the week loomed like a shadow, reminding me that this wasn't just some extended weekend getaway. It was a temporary pause in both our lives. One afternoon, I was curled up on the couch with Jasper snoozing next to me when Ethan came in from the balcony, his face drawn a little tired but determined. He held 2 cups of something steaming and handed one to me. "Thought you could use a break," he said, plopping down beside me. I took the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into my hands. "Thanks. How's the work storm?" "Still brewing," he admitted, taking a sip. "But I'm trying to keep it at bay." We sat there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the rain start again, gentle drops tapping against the window pane, blurring the city lights outside. "I've been thinking," Ethan started, breaking the quiet, "about what comes next when you leave." My heart sank just a little. "Yeah?" He nodded, looking at me with those steady eyes that somehow made vulnerability feel like strength. "I don't want this to just be a week in a stranger's house. I don't want to pretend like this doesn't mean something." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Neither do I." It was weird how quickly the idea of us had taken root in my mind, considering we barely knew each other before this week. But the more time we spent together, the more it felt like we'd been finding each other in pieces all along. So Ethan said, a small smile tugging at his lips, "What do we do about it?" I looked down at my cup, gathering my thoughts. "I don't know. Honestly, I'm scared. This feels real, but what if it's just temporary? What if you have to go back to your life and I have to go back to mine?" Ethan's expression softened. "I'm scared too, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the whole point is to try, even if it's scary." He reached out and took my hand again, fingers weaving with mine. That simple touch felt like a promise. Fragile, but powerful. "Maybe," I said, "we figure it out together." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That night, we stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. We shared stories about our pasts, dreams about the future, and whispered hopes that felt daring to say out loud. Somewhere between the laughter and the quiet moments, I realized I was already falling for him. The way he listened, how he cared, the effortless way he made space for me. A few days later, Ethan surprised me by suggesting we take a day trip outside the city, just to escape the noise and give ourselves some room to breathe. We rented a car and drove out to a nearby lake surrounded by old-growth forest, the kind of place that feels timeless and untouched. We spent hours wandering the trails, talking about everything from favorite childhood memories to fears about what comes next. The sun peeked through the clouds, warming our faces as we sat on a fallen log by the water's edge. At some point, Ethan pulled me close, resting his head on my shoulder. This week has been the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. I smiled, heart full. Me too. The simplicity of the moment, the quiet lapping of the water, the way his warmth seeped into me, felt like a kind of home I didn't know I'd been searching for. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back at the loft, the final day of my house-sitting gig arrived. We spent it packing up the little things I'd brought, cleaning the place together, and stealing a few last moments on the balcony. Ethan was quieter than usual, and I could tell he was wrestling with the same thing I was, the bitter taste of goodbye looming over us. Before I left, he pulled me into a tight hug, the kind that holds you together even when the world feels like it's pulling you apart. "Stay," he whispered. I looked up at him, heart pounding. "I want to," he smiled, a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Then let's figure this out. No pressure, no rush, just us." I nodded, feeling something like relief wash over me. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning. As I closed the door behind me and stepped into the rain, I realized that sometimes the best stories start when you least expect them, and the ones worth telling are the ones that catch you by surprise, in a stranger's house, with a guy who turns out to be way more than just a landlord. Walking out of Ethan's loft that rainy evening, my mind was spinning in ways I didn't expect. The city blurred around me, the neon signs, the damp sidewalks, the hum of cars passing by. But inside, it was quieter, like some part of me had shifted. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving behind a week that had become something much bigger than I'd ever planned. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and started walking toward the bus stop, the rain soaking through my clothes faster than I cared to admit. The city felt different now, less like a place I was just passing through, and more like somewhere I wanted to call home, if only I could figure out how to make that happen. Over the next couple of days, I found myself checking my phone more often than usual. Ethan and I had exchanged a few texts, a mix of casual check-ins, bad jokes, and occasional deep conversations about what we both wanted. It wasn't a grand declaration of, "let's be together forever," but a beginning that felt promising. One night, I got a message that made my heart skip. "Dinner tomorrow? I want to see you." I smiled so wide I almost tripped over my own feet. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We met at a small Italian place a few blocks from Ethan's loft. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. Ethan was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, his usual easy smile lighting up his face. He stood as I came in, and for a moment, we just looked at each other like we were both trying to figure out how to fit this new thing between us. "Hey," he said, voice warm and familiar. "Hey," I replied, suddenly nervous despite all the time we'd spent together. Dinner was one of those nights where conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything, from favorite childhood memories to future travel plans to ridiculous TV shows we couldn't stop watching. And between the laughs and stories, there were those little moments, the way our hands would brush across the table, the way our eyes would meet and hold just a second longer. After dinner, Ethan suggested a walk. The city was quieter now, the late hour chasing away most of the noise. We strolled down familiar streets, the glow of the street lamps casting soft shadows around us. At one point, Ethan stopped and turned to me, eyes serious but gentle. "Alex, I've been thinking about what you said, the idea of figuring this out together." I nodded, heart pounding. "Yeah?" He smiled, that same smile that had stolen my breath 1,000 times already. "I want to try. I want to see where this goes." I felt a rush of something like relief and joy. "Me too," I said. We stood there for a moment, the city around us fading into the background. Then Ethan reached out and took my hand, fingers intertwining with mine. It felt like promise. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In the weeks that followed, we started building something fragile and real. Ethan's hectic work schedule made things complicated, and I had my own life to balance, but we made time for the small stuff. The late-night texts, weekend brunches, lazy afternoons in the park. There were awkward moments too, the kind where vulnerability makes you stumble over your own words, or where you wonder if you're moving too fast or not fast enough. But we kept talking, kept showing up for each other. One Saturday, Ethan surprised me with tickets to a local art exhibit. We wandered the gallery hand in hand, sharing thoughts about the pieces, stealing kisses behind crowded canvases. I realized then that this messy, imperfect connection was becoming something I didn't want to let go of. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Still, the practicalities of life crept in. Ethan's travel schedule was unpredictable, and my own job was growing more demanding. We talked about the future, about what together might look like beyond stolen moments and weekend visits. One night, after a long day, Ethan pulled me onto the couch and said, "I don't want to do this halfway anymore. I want you in my life. In all of it." My heart hitched. "Are you saying?" He nodded, eyes shining. "I'm saying I want to figure out a way to make this work. For real." I smiled through the nerves and excitement. "Me too." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Months later, I found myself moving into Ethan's loft. Not as a house sitter, but as something else entirely. We carved out a life that was messy and beautiful, filled with late-night talks, shared playlists, and the occasional disagreement that somehow only made us stronger. Looking back, it's crazy how a simple gig watching someone's cat turned into the most unexpected and important chapter of my life. Ethan and I found each other in a way neither of us expected, by accident, by chance, and maybe, just maybe, exactly when we needed it most. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. Living together in that loft, I learned a lot about what it means to build something real. Not just the sparks and the butterflies, but the quiet moments. The morning coffee shared in pajamas, the small kindnesses when one of us was exhausted or stressed, the way we made space for each other's messiness without judgment. One evening, after a long day filled with deadlines and errands, we found ourselves sitting on the balcony again, just like those first nights. The city lights stretched out beneath us, the air crisp but not cold. Ethan reached over, his fingers finding mine naturally. For a moment, we just sat there, no words necessary. Then he said softly, "You know, I never thought a house-sitting gig would change my life." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Me neither, but I'm glad it did." He turned to look at me, those familiar eyes full of warmth and something deeper. "This feels like home now. Not just the place, but us." That struck me. The way he said it made me realize how far we'd come from strangers exchanging keys and instructions to partners building a life together. It does. I agreed, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. We sat there, wrapped up in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. No grand declarations needed. Just the steady pulse of something true and steady. Looking back, it's funny how the unexpected can become the most important. A chance encounter, a surprise return, a shared love for a grumpy cat. It all led to this. And maybe that's the thing about love. It's not always fireworks and perfect timing. Sometimes it's the gentle unfolding of two people choosing each other every day in the midst of ordinary life. So here we are, still figuring it out, still learning, still stumbling, but doing it together. And honestly, there's nowhere else I'd rather be.